Like, tell me how I could get this set up. Do I just put it like that? Yeah. Does it just say like that? I don't want to drop it. It's probably pretty expensive. Yeah, and I actually have notes because, can you guys hear me? Closer, closer. My student volunteers, by the way. Can you guys hear me now? Yeah, I have a soft voice, and this is really important story that I'm telling. So I actually brought notes, even though I usually try to teach my lessons without them. And so this is mostly about other people than me. And I'm glad to say that several of them are in this room. So so thanks for coming. And for the rest of you folks, so the title is Wise Ones, Conversations with Very Prominent Mentors in the Avalanche industry in the US. So how did I come interested in mentorship? Well, when I moved to Alaska in 2004, from being a ski patroller in Colorado, I wanted to come back and do something important for a community besides just getting totally swamped with my new full-time job here at the university. And I've always enjoyed working with dogs, so I was like, okay, this is great. I'm going to become an Avalanche dog handler. No big deal. Take a few training courses, read some books, and there you have it. Now I'm going to be really skilled Avalanche dog handler. Well, that's not how it works. Dogs are very intriguing animals. I was a first-time handler. There's no way that I would even start to know how to do that. And that's when I decided, well, I actually need some sort of guidance. And I got connected with the other long-time Avalanche dog handlers here in this community. And I want to give a big shout out for Paul Brousseau and his canine Sky, who pretty much took my hand and took me through the rigorous 2-year training 3 times a week, going through all these different scenarios. And without their help, I would not have ever become an Avalanche dog handler. And so thanks for giving that gift for me. And that also made me thought about other Avalanche professionals. How do you become really competent at what you're doing? Can you just take a class? Can you read a few books? Maybe watch a YouTube video or something? And I landed on this whole concept of mentorship. And I'm going to clarify a few definitions here for the first off the bat in my talk here, because it's a confusing topic. And the definition that I use in our research with Olive Johnston-Bloom, who's been my collaborator, is a long-term mutually beneficial relationship between a more experienced and a less experienced person. And things that it often gets confused about is, for example, teaching and training. I bet Paul Brousseau taught me a few things while I was being mentored by him. Well, teaching and training, it's passing of knowledge. It happens in group settings. It's something that's a professional training. You take classes, you've been instructed. And this is a picture from gun school a few years back. And yeah, that's definitely a way to become a professional. I mean, I'm teaching at the university where you can get a 4-year degree. There are degrees in Avalanche science. You can go to MSU, you can go to Simon Fraser University. You go to places nowadays and get a PhD in snow science. Or you can take a level 1 and then just go in the field and start trying to becoming an Avalanche professional. That would be a way longer way. So how is teaching and training not mentoring? Well, it's not necessarily long-term. It could be as short as 1 day. And it's definitely not focused on the individuals that are involved with that. Okay, so then the next thing that mentoring often gets confused about is coaching. And so I'm going to give you a definition. It's a training method that focuses on individuals' needs and accomplishments through close observation and impartial and non-judgmental feedback. And we already heard from Deb that getting close feedback on how you're doing your job is really important. So once again, sometimes we think well, somebody is a really good coach. Yeah, that's part of your professional development. You should be coached by other people in order to become good. And so receiving this feedback is especially important in Avalanche world, because we all know it's like a wicked environment. You really need to, in the end of the day, end of your work day, know, did you just get lucky that day, or did you actually get some sort of feedback that will let you learn more about it? But this is not a holistic way to look at how individual becomes a professional. So that's how that changes from mentoring. Another thing is role modeling. So for example, this guy here on the right is Don Sheriff. He's like one of my role models, but by heck, he probably wouldn't know that because I've never actually told him that. But you might be a lot of people in this room. You give subtle clues for a bunch of other people, how you conduct your business as being an Avalanche professional. So that's like you are indeed being a role model. And yeah, you should do that. It's kind of like show, not just tell philosophy, that you are being that trustworthy, respected professional in your environment, and other people can take a look how you're doing. But once again, it's not a mutually beneficial relationship. Somebody could be somebody's role model and they wouldn't even know it, like Don Sheriff. He doesn't know that. Anybody else know the other geeks in this picture? Yeah, Jeremy Jones and Johnny Collins. And anyways. So then it really brings it back into the Avalanche industry here specifically. So mentorship gets referenced a lot in this industry, like, oh yeah, you got to get a mentor, or who is your mentor, who's being mentored for. So Olaf and I got really interested about this in 2016. And we actually surveyed the whole professional membership of A3. And one of the most interesting results from that study was that there was actually like a relatively short list of people who just kept popping up like, yeah, I've been mentored by this person, like Rod Newcomb. Oh my gosh, Rod Newcomb told me so much about how I should be a professional. Same thing happened with the guy Tom Kimbrough. He is from Utah. So what we really wanted to do is we wanted to look into what are these people, these amazing list of people who were identified in our first study. And so we interviewed 11 people this summer, and we really wanted to learn from them hows and whys of mentorship. And I got really starstruck actually doing this project, because a lot of these people are like really well-known names, and it was just like an amazing opportunity to be able to talk to Knox Williams, or our own Dave Hamry. And I mean, you can read the list here. Something to note here, though, that there are only 2 women that we interviewed, Wendy Wagner and Lynn Wolf, and there was only 3rd female mentioned in this list by their mentor, their own mentors. But I do want to recognize the fact that usually female professionals are seeking out mentorship. So if you're sitting in this room and you're a female Avalanche professional, think about it. So let's go back into the memory lane just for a moment. So we were not able to interview some people that have been really prominent in creating Avalanche industry where they are. For example, John Montaigne here. He was mentioned by Carl Birkland as a mentor. And there are like all these early Avalanche gurus who really just like, we wish we could have interviewed them, right? But the time went on, they're already skiing in better pastures than we are. But for example, John Montaigne, he started MSU Snow Science program, and he started ISSW workshops. So that's pretty prominent. Another person is Ed Lachapelle, who's like immense influence on several states in this nation. And he was mentioned by both Knox Williams and Dave Hamry. And then this guy, Art Judson, I love his quote, you may think you know what the soap will do, but you don't. You know, how simple of a mantra is that? He started in the Forest Service as a snow ranger in the 60s and pretty much created this avalanche danger warning system. And that leads into Knox Williams, our first interviewee. And he painted a really good picture for us from what happened in the 70s. You know, there are a lot of like Renaissance era of Avalanche world then. And Knox has a meteorology degree, okay? But he got like hired to do this avalanche stuff. And he said in his interview that he didn't know avalanche from a snowball. He was a meteorologist. So our judge pretty much like took his hand and dragged him rigmarole, like, so this is how we do this thing, you know, this is what happens with snow, you know, all the weather stuff, but like, let's see what happens with the snow. And that's how Knox got started. Now, you might think that, times were different in the 70s, that was a time when you needed mentorship. But several of the folks that we are like right now working in the field, for example, Wendy Wagner. What's Wendy Wagner's degree? Anybody know? Oh, she's a meteorologist, kind of like Knox Williams, right? But in our interviews, Wendy actually said that she could have never become an avalanche forecaster unless she had gone in like thousands of days in the field with the people that mentored her, like Drew Hardesty, for example. Next, I want to read you something that Don Sheriff mentioned in his interview. He compared becoming an avalanche professional into learning a trade. He said, becoming a professional electrician or a plumber, you're looking at 4,000-hour apprenticeship. Throughout that, you have formal classes, you have examinations, a lot of on-the-job training. After 4,000 hours and an exam, you become a journeyman. And with another 4,000 hours of apprenticeship, you get to the master process. For better or worse, we're looking at a profession with 13 days of formal training in avalanche industry. That's a different model, and our profession may be more risky than plumbing. I'd say that mentorship is crucial where formal training is quite short and finite. Another interview of ours is Ethan Green, who is the director of the Colorado Avalanche Information Center, which is one of the largest centers. He's overseeing 17 forecasters currently. And being a supervisor is referenced very often as that's where the mentorship starts. You know, like you hire somebody, you take them under your wing, and then you just kind of teach them through in-house. And that's very often. And what happens there is you create this network, professional network within the office that you're working in, and sometimes it becomes so like robust that it bleeds out when you move out of your office, and then you just kind of keep doing it. And if you notice here, Ethan actually started as an intern, which is amazing, right? That's like really funny quote from Carl Berkman. So being a supervisor, important. David Hamry, on the other hand, who is a very highly respected professional, not only in our state, but also outside. He's been in the business since 1971, doing all kinds of different parts in this industry, and being a lot of operations. And one of the classic things I want to share about David Hamry is that if you ask him a question, usually he answers, "I don't know. Let me know when you find out." And that's just something about this whole idea of like, being humble, and usually it's followed by intelligent conversation. But the part about this thing is that David Hamry said that it's part of his ethics of being part of this, this profession. It's responsibility to mentor other people. And you can read it in the quote. Another way how mentorship starts is from teaching and being a teacher and a student. And so especially for new entry-level avalanche professionals, learning from the teachers, that's where it starts. But you know, like I teach here at the university. I have a lot of students, but for some reason, I couldn't say that I mentor all of them. So this is, if you're now sitting in the audience and you're wondering like, oh, I want to have a mentor, how can I going to get there? There are some very good tips that our interviews told us. For example, these people keep eye out for those that have intellectual curiosity. Intellectual curiosity. Are you good at asking questions? Are you following up with those questions? How about how passionate are you about avalanches? You know, if you're working as a ski patroller, you're like busy season. It feels like it's like you're drinking from a fire hydrant. So what you're really wanting to do is finding those people that is like a long-term investment. If you're just like in and out, it's harder to get that time, right? So they're looking for those long-term people who are passionate and interested. And what do you get in exchange? Well, you get knowledge, you get opportunities, And these people actually network for you. So then when you want to move on and you're looking for something else, they can lead you to the right direction. Then when you get in advanced roles of your world, many of our interviews said that the roles actually switch. So they like being mentors because their mentees are like bringing them up. They're like keeping them relevant and like teaching them new ins and outs and give you some technological advances. Don Sheriff once again he plays it really well. It's like, well, you know, I've taught a lot of people, but when I have a question, who I'm going to ask? And he's actually like, he has all these people that he likes to talk. He might have taught them before, but now he's like, well, I actually don't know how to do this technology. So can you help me out? And that's really important. So, you know, if you're not mentoring anybody right now, you feel like you're in the golden age, maybe you're ready to retire, maybe one way for you to stay relevant is start mentoring other people. And then Scott Savage, there he is, sitting there, but he didn't send me any snow pictures, so here we are. We're paddling today. But the point that Scott made really interesting, so Scott also works for a small forecast center, 3 forecasters total. So what this mentorship means is that he has a raw desk of contacts on speed dial that he can just tap into, like when things get perplexing or something that you don't know about, or there's something unusual, or maybe emotionally taxing. So you have these people that you can actually like connect with, and they can give you something to go forward with it. And I really enjoyed that quote from Scott, like, it's not just like you in your operations, it's like people elsewhere. And just, you know, maybe in places like this, you can network with folks and find that connection. And then there's people like Carl Birkland. So he's been in business since 1981. He's the director of National Avalanche Center. And he was like so into it. Like he gave us like pages of people that he mentored or who has mentored him. And he's just like arch mentor, really. But what he was saying is that even if he's been so long in this business, he still needs to have these other folks that he can like tap in to see if he's like actually on the right track or not. And what he really focused on is collegial communication. So being able to talk with people and creating these high functional professional networks. And we create a little graph from our, thank you, Rachel Newell, who coded this thing for us. That's what Alex was talking about. But, you know, it's like really neat to look at the clusters. So like we have like these almost like geographical clusters where networking is happening. So it's like true, like we could see that there are these really important networks, but sometimes they bleed over across geographical lines. Okay, so that's a cool graph and all, nice visual. Think for a moment, what do you need professional networks for in this profession? Well, if you're an Avalanche professional, you're going to deal with uncertainty all the time. There'll be a question that you won't answer. Wendy Wagner quoted that biggest lesson that she learned from her mentors was humility, that you don't always know it. And a lot of people like Ethan Green said that early days in the field with his mentors truly like created his attitude and his field practices. And those probably has kept him alive and be in this place where he can now supervise 17 other forecasters. Henry Munter from the Chugach Heli Guide said very poignantly, there aren't enough days in the winter or winters in your career to see it all yourself and figure it out. The volume of decisions we have to make relative to the amount of feedback that we get is just incredibly out of whack. I think that being able to get insight from other people that have been doing it for a long time and learn their own lessons is really critical. Youngest person in the list was Krish Marshall, who is a ski guide, I shouldn't say that. He's IFMGA full pen guide. And he really discussed this idea that he needs to have somebody who can have open and honest communication throughout the whole time. And having difficult dialogues, like being able to disagree. And that's like how you deal with uncertainty. It's not like you're sitting on your desk and trying to like scratch your head like this wouldn't happen. If you're dealing with stuff, you need to reach out and talk to people about it. And you have to find those people that will help you do that. Scott Savage actually brought out this, he quoted like, oh, I talk a lot, and I talk a lot all the time. And I think that's the key for a mentor. Like if you're a good mentor, you're actually talking, you're like motor mouthing away. And if you're not talking a lot, you might be missing something, or you might be assuming something. So just talk, keep asking questions and talk a lot. And then sometimes mentors teach more about life than about snowpack and avalanches. And Drew Hardesty, who is I consider him like a philosopher of avalanche forecasting, and he shared a story from his early career about fatality that happened on one of his forecast days, and I'm going to once again read it for you in full. My first and only season up in Logan area mountains, and we were dealing with the deep slab instability. And I thought it was over, but it was not. And I issued a low avalanche danger that morning, and we had an avalanche fatality. It was a snowmobiler up just along the Idaho borders there, sort of wearing in on the fax machine. Yeah, you guys know what fax machine is? Yeah. Comes this fax from Tom Kimbrough, and I still have it. I'm looking at it right now. Date is March 5th, 2000, and it says, Drew, here's a couple of pages from the Dalai Lama's latest book that I thought pertained to the forecasting dilemma, Ethics for a New Millennium. And that really grabbed me insofar as it wasn't so much where, in this case, Kimbrough was mentoring me on the snow like, oh, depth horse sure activated, or you have to be more conservative, and on and on and on. It was more of a life perspective and approach on how to look at our jobs as avalanche people, and how the snow interacts with people and lives and so forth. And then just bringing it back into the home country here. So it's this dirty underbelly of avalanche business that there are people who die. There could be litigation. You could make a mistake at your work. And only thing that really keeps you at it is like you want to do your job well. And Henry has a really good quote here. I think I don't have time to read it through, but the gist of the matter is that you have to come to work every day expecting to get a feedback. If your supervisor is not getting it to you, you should look into people who will, and always seeking out a better way to do your job. And that's the only way that you can be prepared for things that might come your way tomorrow, veering in a fax or via email. And I'm going to leave you with Carl Berkeley quote with some of the Alaskan characters here. Carl Berkeley picture about Drew Hardesty quote. Everyone in our greater profession should consider who have I mentored and who have mentored me, and who might I reach out to on both sides of the coin. It only further strengthens the fabric of our community and is a way of giving back along the arc of your career. And last slide, and I think then I'm out of time. So we all like huge beer. It's not beer time yet, don't worry about it. There might be beer later. But so thank yous for all the people that we interviewed. Friends of the Chugach National Forest Avalanche Information Center gave us some funding for our research needs. And I can't thank enough for all the people who have talked with us about mentoring in the last few years. So thank you, everyone. Any questions?
Eeva, I'm wondering, in your travels, in the National Slow Science Conference and other places, do you see many presentations on this very subjective topic?
Subjective. Qualitative research. Subjective.
Yes, I see that with the data collection.
Yeah.
It's still the core thing that you're studying, subjective.
Yeah, so I consider this almost like we're collecting history of Avalanche industry in the U.S. That's how I see it. We're collecting these stories. Yeah, it's very subjective. It's like human stories. Is that what you're going for?
Do you see many other folks delving into this area?
I have not. There are some people who are looking at, for example, at ISSW, there was this one study where people were, a scientist was looking at ski patrollers and how they learn to become ski patrollers. And they were looking at cognitive processes, and she was looking at this through her case. So there is some research done on this. Yeah, I don't know. We can talk about it more. Yeah. Yeah.
Among your research participants, did the fact, or not the fact, did it ever come up that there may be a mentorship gap between experienced professionals and maybe aspiring, not there yet professionals? There's sort of like not enough knowledgeable professionals to be able to mentor these people that want to learn.
Right. So, if I understand you correctly, so there are a lot of people who want to be mentored, and it's like that's being said a lot. Like everybody is asked to seek a mentor, so we were looking at from these folks who were like really prominent people that have been giving back, and we haven't looked yet on the side of the thing. Like if you're a young person. How could the industry be more opening of making that happen? There has been some formalized mentorship programs, but sometimes they don't work that well, or they don't go in a lot of depth. So, but yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You mentioned there were several names that kept coming up as mentors to a lot of people going out with figures in the Avalanche community. So what does that say about the extent to which mentors are participating directly with the mentees? Like, what does the role of mentor look like in terms of like hours of work that they do? Like how much investment is that demanded?
Yeah, so that would be a good future study, just look into it more. But in this specific stage of the research, we just wanted to talk with the people who have been doing it a lot. But we haven't really looked at it like in quantifiable measurements, actually. But if I go from my own personal anecdotal time when I've been mentored in my professional settings, it's numerous hours. But maybe Scott or Dave could have something to say. How many hours have you put in mentoring?
A lot. 1,000 hours.
There you have it. Yep. All right. Thank you.
Okay, we have a lunch break now that with pizza.